My name is Justin, and I assume either you were drawn by the snappy title or you're curious about possibly injecting some pop culture characters into your games. I'd just like to share some of my experience with the games that I've been running over the last year. Primarily pop culture inspired games in D&D, like rule sets, and for this one's. Whereas yesterday's panel was more of a discussion, an open discussion, this is more of a lecture. So I will pause for questions at a couple points. Yeah, I'm trying to. How are we doing? Is that better? Oh, all right. Cool. Yeah, so I'll pause for questions at a few points. And I ask that you hold your questions until then. We're going to be doing some exercises as well to try and get some points across. So that we can take some of the tips that I've learned from possibly this, some of your games. This is something you're interested in doing. Good. You can follow it at the URL bit.ly/mag. I believe that's case sensitive. So if you want to have this deck either now, follow along with it, or refer back to some of the bullet points or the exercises, or if you want to have it for later, I'm going to leave it up at that short URL. So it's bit.ly/mag, M-A-G, Thunder, capitalized as such. Follow along. Cool. So I think first, we'll just gauge the room a little bit. How many people in here are currently running a game as a GM? Show of hands. Cool. Okay. How many people are looking for lessons to possibly bring up the subject? Like you're a player in a group and you're looking for tips for possibly bringing up the subject of having pop culture characters in some of your games to play in. Show of hands. Cool. Okay. Cool. All right. So a little bit of background about how I started on this topic. It's about a year ago, actually, right at night. I had a group of friends who I've been playing out of Abyss with. If any of you are familiar with out of Abyss or some of the other Wizards produced modules for 5th edition, some of them can be pretty lengthy. Some of them can run upwards of 40, 50, 60 sessions. In our case, it took 70 sessions over the course of about 2.5 years to get through out of Abyss, which was a very fun campaign, but also a heavy on subject matter campaign. You're fighting demons. You're going to the Underdark, which is a place, one setting in the world of D&D, the tavern, where everything wants to betray or kill you or take advantage of you. You don't really have many chances for grace because it's a lot to process. And by the end of it, we were our characters were slowly going mad from the influence of the demon princes, which were released on the Underdark, and it was a lot. It was a very satisfying conclusion to that campaign, but after 2 years of something really heavy and intense and dark with threats and mounting everywhere, we were ready for something a little bit different. I think the conversation about Google Chat was something like, we were all just thinking of possible characters, and one of my players, it's fairly. There you go, how's that? Cool. One of my players was looking at possible races for this character and came across the area of Cobra, which are like herd people in the setting of D&D. And they live for about, I believe, 20 years, something like that. They're very short-lived species. And of course, my group is a bunch of high achievers. They're all in school, they're all going to grad school, getting their MBAs and stuff. And they're thinking, God, if that were me, I'd already be dead. So what would it be like if I played a character who, was this sort of high achiever type as an Aarakocra? And immediately my players went, I'm basically talking about Harvey Birdman, attorney at law. And I was like, okay. I'm DMing, we're going to run Sunless Citadel, which is in the Toast from Young Portal adventure book. A very, very good introductory adventure if anybody's looking to maybe run a game for some newer players or if they're and we just got to thinking, all right, well, what would Harvey Birdman look like in the world of D&D? What little things can we tweak about the character? And I think the point where we all got kind of hooked on this idea was when he said, I want a bag of holding, but I want it to be a briefcase full. And that's when I was like, okay, we're just going to do this. We're just going to roll with it. So the question that we all came up with was, why bring War to the Forgotten Realms? So in that first game, we had a rotating character who was each member of War in succession. We had Jerry Seinfeld and his white Nikes of striding and springing. And we have Harvey Birdman. And that campaign, we didn't mean necessarily for it to be a completely pop culture-centered campaign. We still ran it as this sort of vanilla module straight out of the book. But we had a blast with it, because the first thing Harvey Birdman comes, when he encounters the main villain, the first thing he does, reaches into his briefcase of holding, pulls out a subpoena. And the enemy's a giant crab. So he hands the subpoena to this crab. He can't open it. It's rolled up parchment. He's just kind of waving it around trying to open it. And hilarity ensued. It was absolutely sort of a non sequitur counter to maybe what you might encounter in a lot of these D&D or tabletop RPG, especially high fantasy type settings. So I wanted to also bring up one more note. When I'm talking about bringing these sort of pop culture characters into tabletop gaming settings, I'm not talking about reenacting. This is actually a very timely Penny Arcade comic, just came out and give everybody a second, on the idea of reenacting as part of a tabletop gaming session. So he's literally just reading the book Dragonlance at his table, giving the illusion of choice, sort of. This is the epitome of railroading, I guess. But you get what I mean. If you are just looking to reenact Dragonlance or Star Wars or what have you at the table, you already know what's going to happen. And maybe that's the kind of game you want to play, but for me, the appeal of taking these characters and these worlds and putting them into a tabletop RPG setting is more about these crazy what-if scenarios. Not necessarily about repeating things that have already been done in media, but just taking these characters, these iconic characters that everybody at the table knows, and putting them in film. Speaking of Safeway, who are these characters? I'm going to define my terms here because I'm a nerd. I might be a new company here. Pop culture characters. Best definition I could come up with is the cast of iconic characters from film, comics, television, literature, music, and more. The key features I'm looking for here is they're recognizable, timeless, and they set the mold. They create these archetypes that we refer to later, consciously or not, when we're creating other characters. We think back to characters that have inspired us in media, and we combine them with parts of ourselves and the kind of characters that we find interesting and we want to play. And we end up creating something new, synthesizing something new, using these archetypes that have already been established by these very iconic characters. You can see on the right. That is an illustration by Robert M. Ball, in a whole series of 50 heroes and 50 villains from popular culture. And some of these have been used in some of the games that I've run. Maybe not last week, but I do want a gadget. At some point. I got the name of that character wrong. So what was Gizmo? I was close. And I can't decide if that's MF Doom or if that is Maximus Decimus Meridius in Gladiator. A little bit of both. I think you see what you want to see now. But yeah, you get my point. So these are the characters who we draw from these characters from inspiration when we're creating our own characters for our own games. And in many situations, when we're describing our characters to other people at the table, we'll call them these characters for context. What I'm talking about is going one step beyond that, not just having these there as print or as reference to put the characters that we created in context. What I'm talking about is actually taking these characters and the scenarios and the relationships and connections and items and abilities that they show in their media and putting them into your game. As we explored that more and more, I found that the benefit of having these characters in our games was that it solved a lot of RPG pitfalls, tabletop RPG pitfalls that we see at the table. A few of our players, even after having spent 2.5 years playing through a campaign, we're still having trouble sort of finding their voice as a character, finding their motivation, really knowing what their character wants, where they want to go in this given scenario, coming up with the quirks or lines for their character, or not really knowing how to be in that space. Because maybe they feel pressured, maybe they feel like they're not creative enough, maybe they see these sort of live plays where people are putting up very excellent characters, and for whatever reason there's a barrier there. And I've found that by giving the players an option to explore these characters who already have an established board, they already have quotes, they already have items, abilities, and such. They're given a much clearer blueprint for how to play that character. And that isn't to say that they're reenacting, like I mentioned earlier, because I'm trying to avoid that. They are very much taking that character and putting the spin on it. Putting the spin on it. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Another fun thing that I found, a little benefit that I found, is that really when we're doing this sort of game, I've discovered that we're in effect moving goals here. Because for some people, some players come to the table, and I'm not really talking about whether it's good or bad to be an maxer. I'm really talking about the attitude of whether it's good or bad to want to play D&D in order to win the game. If the point of how to do this, the point of the 2.5-year campaign was to win a game, then maybe for some people that's a good motivator. But I think for where I come from as a player, maybe we're doing ourselves a disservice. We're just coming to the table to beat a monster and win the game, and not really explore together as a group maybe what we can, what our characters are for one another, how they interact. We don't really come to synthesize anything new. And that's really one of the reasons that I personally find motivation to keep coming back to the table and keep playing this game. So if you are not focusing on winning a game, if you're not focusing necessarily on overcoming a scenario so much as just having these characters in a world, these characters who we find compelling because of our own experience growing up and seeing these characters portrayed in media, if our goal is to really just put them in a weird scenario with a bunch of characters they would not normally interact with and see what happens, then we've moved the goalposts here. We're not talking about winning a game anymore, we're talking about how well can we take a very restricted rule system, restricted in the sense that it isn't necessarily designed for this purpose, and create Mr. Freeze, and play Mr. Freeze and Captain Cole. I keep thinking of Cole being characters for some reason. You have, if I'm playing that character, then my goal becomes picking abilities and items and such that fit that character's archetype, rather than the characters, or the options that I think are most viable because of we're in the top 20 D&D builds article or seen in the video link online. And one other problem that I've found this group solves is a lot of times players just might not be engaged in typical RPG settings, be it high fantasy, sci-fi. They're not connecting with the places, the NPCs. They're not really remembering things about the setting that much. They'll probably remember things about directly related to the scenario, to the NPCs that they've enjoyed interacting with, but maybe the place itself, the lore, the games, all that, they might not find quite as engaging. But if I'm talking about these characters who we've known and connected with all our lives, and who, for the most part, we know the lore of these characters already and we're invested in it, and that overcomes that barrier as well. Cool. So I think I'll pause here for a second and ask if anybody has any questions so far, based on everything I've talked about. All right, cool. So now what I would like to do is talk about the first that first scenario I talked about was really just taking this game, taking this model as it was, putting these weird characters in it, and having fun. After that, where we decided to take this was adapting a model from start to finish to characters around a chosen game. In this case, breakfast cereal mascots. So I was Count Chocula. I was playing this one as Count Chocula. We had Dingham the Snacks Frog. I conducted ritual sacrifice to summon my demon rock toucan Sam. A lot of NPCs went missing around the corner a couple times, and I came back, with a new supply of blood, some of my demon rock friend. Just that sort of thing. We decided to just go full on with this idea. We took another module from Tales from the Yawning Portal. In this case, it was Dead and Thay. Dead and Thay, if you're not familiar with it, is essentially one of the longer dungeon crawls published in recent, with the exception of Dungeon of Mad Mage, which just came out. One of the longer dungeon crawls that's available in the official published materials with edition D&D like that, so it's a little bit. You're going through a location called the Doom Vault, and you're fighting liches. I do not care about any of the Red Wizards' names. Anything they were doing, really anything about the scenario didn't really connect with me that much. But I do remember that one of the liches, with me as Chocula, the vampire, the Count Chocula vampire, was racing to be Simon Belmont, and that guy's a dick. So that's what I latched onto. And you see, this is where we start making connections here, because we're not talking about us versus these liches that we just met we're supposed to be. We're talking about established characters with established storylines and villains. So there's a few notes where I'd like to start here is on creating this sort of where you start from as you're talking with your group. If you're the GM or if you're part of the group, and you want to start creating this sort of experience. A few questions to ask yourself. The big ones I want to talk about here are setting theme and tone. I think those are important to talk about when you're starting out any tabletop role-playing game. It all comes down to that session 0. I've heard it again and again in the panels this weekend. I think it's very important. I'm not going to get too deep on what a session 0 looks like, because I could talk for 2 hours on that. But particular questions when we're talking about setting up a pop culture campaign. On the setting, as I just mentioned, do we want to repurpose an existing campaign and basically reskin it to have characters from our themes, the characters that we've chosen, their rivals, their allies, items that they would typically use in their media. How can I really engage with my players, get an idea of what they're excited about exploring as part of this scenario, and work that into the adventure that I'm creating. So like I said, we're repurposing these liches as the actual adversaries that our characters would face, giving us more reason, more context to be there. It's especially important in a shorter adventure, because I'll show of hands if you compare to, you played an adventure and you play through it, you don't really connect with the scenario that much, you're just playing it for fun. How many people have experienced that? If you're playing the game, you're not really connecting with the scenario that much. And especially I feel like in a shorter game, a lot of people experience that, because you're there, you don't really get a chance to build up the backstory, you don't really get a chance to explore more that much, you're just there, you go through the dungeon, you go through the scenario, you're done. This fixes that. The theme. So, as we were talking about earlier, we had this group chat going. The theme could be something like a series that we're all interested in. It could be a particular character archetype. I'm running one now that is it's homebrew adventure with all bounty hunter players. And players being who they are, will take that theme or that setting and just completely ignore it. So we have to decide how certain am I going to be when I'm deciding, okay, I'm going to ask you this, is MacGyver a bounty hunter? I'm getting a lot of, it could go either way. Captain Cold, MacGyver, John Kimball isn't that guy. He likes to blow things up and speak entirely in Arnold soundboard quotes, which I think is pretty brilliant. MacGyver. An absolute gem to have at the table. One of my players actually took, and I'll get to this on preparation, one of the players actually took, he watched like 3 seasons of MacGyver. These are like 30 episode, hour-long seasons. And he wrote down about 10 pages of MacGyver just to take that table. You never know when a quote's going to be just perfect for a situation. Within the first hour of play, they're doing, putting down a bounty who's having a clandestine meeting in a warehouse on the F1 in the top floors of Berkeley. And they bust up the meeting, they go to the warehouse foreman's office, and they see notes about the desk, and true RPG takes this one fashion, explore, expounding upon the plot and all that. He busted out this quote, he had this look in his eyes, and I knew he had a perfect quote for this. He just pulls open his packet of notes and says, my grandfather used to say, you can tell a lot about a man by what's on his desk, if you can get to it. Just, he had that ready to roll. As unbelievable. And so you get these little moments, and sometimes they're weird quotes like that. Sometimes you just come out with this classic quote that's perfect for the character and the situation. Getting back to this, I've gone way ahead of myself. Getting back to this, how strict am I going to be in allowing characters who might not necessarily fit the theme, but kind of adjacent to it? At the end of the day, it's really about exploring these pop culture characters, not necessarily by the theme isn't number one. Number one is what do players find engaging? What do I find engaging? What do my players find engaging? So if there's a character who kind of fits the theme, but not really permissive, so I will usually let that happen. And tone. Tone is just the discussion I feel like every GM needs to have with their party before we start. And the tone, particularly, when I say tone, I'm thinking about like lighthearted. Are we just having a lighthearted romp? Are we having gotten horror? Are we having, just a monster hunting or what have you? So like the subject matter of the adventure, perhaps, as well as the general feeling of the world that we're going to be interacting with. This can really drive characters who are character choice here, because we can either fit characters who, we can either choose characters who fit that tone, or we can choose characters who are just comically diametrically opposed to that tone. So, for example, we could have a lighthearted adventure set in some sort of fluffy cloud elemental land with people, and you have Sasuke from Naruto and Batman there, and they're just brooding all over the place. That could be fun. But people characters who are fitting the tone comedically going to that tone, and everybody. The next one is an exercise slide. So does anybody have any questions at this point? Anything I've discussed so far? Cool. Okay. A few common pitfalls. So in the course of about a year of running these campaigns, definitely encountered a few, as I mentioned earlier, a few good things, now a few maybe other issues that might be unique to this kind of campaign. Bending the rules to implement a specific character's ability. Like if I were to create specific rules around a Pokemon themed campaign, around capturing monsters and such. Just being careful about what I'm doing in terms of balance. To me, I don't define balance as whether or not something is too powerful in the game. I define balance as whether or not something is too powerful to the point where it detracts from the enjoyment of other people at the table. So if everybody's overpowered, or if one person's a little overpowered and everybody's having fun, I don't really care. But if the game, if one person can't do anything and the other people are super powerful, it's probably not a good situation. And novelty. Novelty is a huge factor when we're playing these characters. Playing Batman or playing Chocolate is fun for laughs a couple times, but it wears off pretty quick. So I usually try to keep the scope of my campaigns pretty limited, and I feel like that is, in the situation that I described earlier, we're coming off this very long campaign. That was just kind of what we needed anyway. That's one of the reasons why that really worked for us. So keep scope in mind. And the coherence of your narrative is probably going to suffer the more you try to expand it and try to keep introducing elements from the media. Unless you're very, very clever with it, that can get a little taxing, I think, on the creativity. Unless people are just fine with the narrative being a little bit incoherent. Cool. So with all that in mind, just take a few minutes. If you have maybe a paper with you, feel free to write down some notes, or you can just take a minute, process over some of the things I said, and we can talk through Some ideas for maybe a setting, an adventure, or a particular kind of theme, using these sort of pop culture characters that maybe you're thinking. Um, so yeah, I guess just take a minute. Does anybody have anything that's come to mind or any questions before we? What's up?
I know there's a homebrew book. There's a whole rule book set for Marvel superheroes campaign.
Yes.
And they have stats for all the different superheroes and everything to play as characters.
Yeah.
Or you can create your own based on the different types of superheroes that are out there in the world. You go over the powers that you have, you go over the amount of talents that you have, and the amount of content. What I'm curious is, in this kind of setting, where you're creating it for yourself, how do you define the rules? Is there a particular method that you go by for creating the rules? Do you based on D&D?
Sure. I think that's going to be entirely dependent on the game system that you want to use. There are definitely game systems out there, like Powered by the Apocalypse, Fate, both have a lot of modules that are geared towards like superheroes that you can use for maybe a game that is more adapted to the kind of character, like using, I forget the one that Adventure Zone used for their superhero arc. I forget exactly what the name of that module was, but there are systems out there that are built for that. I'm lazy and I don't like learning new systems and I like 5e a lot. So I think to that point, like, you could definitely use those stat blocks for like Captain America or something. A lot of what we've been doing is taking these sort of character archetypes and sort of retrofitting them to the class options, the character options that are currently available in game. And that's where I get into this a little bit later when I'm talking about maybe like creating what the players can do to set themselves up in character forward. But working within those constraints of how can I make the MacGyver or Sherlock Holmes or something as a character in D&D with the options that I have, and sort of retrofit like that. And to me, that kind of appeals to my the idea of working within those constraints appeals to me. Having to get very creative with spell choices and all that to create that character in 5e kind of works for me. But it's also a great idea of going on Tumblr or D&D scale or something, try for RPG, looking at builds or custom stat blocks for superheroes or whatever pop culture characters. That's a good idea. Any other questions? What's up?
I've spent maybe the last year or so sort of hard time conceptualizing the show campaign. I was on kind of like a dark side of Norman Rockwell, Mayberry type of thing. And I originally conceptualized it as like a first campaign, just because like, oh, okay, well you can adapt that to everything. But I also did not want to bother learning anything else.
Yeah.
So now, like more and more, I'm thinking about like retrofitting it into 5e, and I'd like to hear some thoughts on taking the 5e system and sort of working that into a low/no magic thing. Like, for example, I have one guy who wants to play, it's this guy actually, who wants to play like a Methodist circuit preacher in the adventure. You know, so you think, oh, well, that might be the cleric. You know, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure. So you're asking about maybe a specific question, just so I can make sure everybody heard the question right. I understand that.
Yeah.
That I understand.
Just like if you're using 5e as a system for whatever, like how do you adapt things like low, no magic?
Yeah. Yeah. So one thing, I don't have much experience running low or no magic campaigns myself, but I've watched a hell of a lot of videos online about DMing. So I'm going to draw some examples from that. In particular, there was a one. Of course, the name of the series is I'm blanking on it right now. But it is the idea of limiting the level of magic in your game. Like, some low magic campaigns will only have up to third level magic, and anything beyond that is like difficult. Nobody else really does it. And just curbing the rate at which you learn magic. I'm sure if you look online, you can probably find a low magic rule set. My general thought is that if I'm trying to think of an alternative rule set to D&D, somebody else has already made it, probably made it better than I can. And again, I'm very lazy, so somebody's probably done that. But like limiting the ways in which people learn spells, limiting their spell recovery is another one. Really just taking these mechanics that are in place around spell casting and learning spells and just kind of trimming them back a little bit. But at the same time, I feel like in general, over spellcasters in the tradition are skew a little bit more powerful than other classes, so by maybe trimming back some of their powering, not really making them use too much, but at the same time, like if I'm a wizard and I only have 2 spell slots, once I burn those, and unless I have cantrips or if I produce power cantrips, I'm going to be really useless real fast. So I think that's another thing to keep in mind. Encouraging players to maybe play characters, classes like third options might also be a good. Cool. That was a question. Cool. Yeah, cool. All right. Any thoughts on our exercise? No, I have a suggestion. Anybody who's hard to create a campaign setting or a theme that they might possibly like to explore? Okay. Yeah. So I think. Yeah, what's up?
I just had a question about your serial mascot
Yes.
campaign. In terms of that, did you adapt from 5e, so what would you do for the rabbit?
For the what? The rabbit?
Yeah.
If I were the rabbit, if I were having somebody play the rabbit, it would probably be just a really delusional character who thinks that he's a rabbit, sort of like maybe, or Donnie Darko style type thing, where somebody sees a rabbit all the time. This is why doing this is fun. So this is a conceptual moment where I say, I've got a character in mind, how do I do something really weird to this game? I like the Donnie Darko. Gotta get stressed. Yes. Cool. All right. So I think maybe what we might feel a little bit more valuable to this group is more specific to the characters within this sort of setting. Robocop is lawful neutral, get at me. Cool. So straight up. What we just talked about with Donnie Darko, not straight up. Straight up would be dropping Gandalf or Iron Man or somebody who has some sort of clear RPG class archetype into your game. Just taking them as is, dropping them in the game. I think this works really well with characters that said you have a clearly defined class archetype. The more recognizable the character they are, if they have some sort of tics. I was going to use Captain Jack Sparrow here, but yeah, I thought that Johnny Depp lately, not the best guy. The more they fit between, like we're doing all wizards, all wizards campaign, as fun as it is, and all pop culture wizards can be better. So really, we're just talking about taking a character, putting them in the game. This works really well with newbies. This works really well with people who aren't as comfortable bending and being creative with their character builds to create something new. They just want to play a straight up class, they want to be a wizard, they want to be a hero. Cool. Any questions there? Okay. So this needs some explanation. This character is Kazame from Natural Entrance Christmas Vacation. He's a good-hearted simpleton. I think that's kind of what to say about somebody, but he's just sort of fits that sort of character archetype. So what we have here is a character who is well known. I assume I might be maybe misjudging the age range of this group. But we have a character here who's somewhat well known. If you didn't know before, you know now, if you watch it. It's really January, it's so much a Christmas movie. We're taking a character like this who fits the game. We did a Christmas one-shot because Wizards of the Coast released like 5 small Christmas one-shots over the course of December. And one of our players was Plissken. This was a player we played, by the way, who went from playing this first sort of character, just a straight-up character, and is now playing this sort of more creative sort of character type because he felt when he was coming to the table, he joined us after our first long campaign, so this was like this past year, he was new to the idea of playing D&D. he went from not really being comfortable creating a character of his own, not really knowing where to take it, to suddenly taking a character from that fits the theme and turning him into a barbarian who really likes his PBR and really, really wants to find his cousin Clark. When he doesn't find his cousin Clark, things get a little messy. So, what we have here is a character who's not really associated with adventuring, but is part of pop culture, who we can sort of twist a little bit. So this is kind of where that Donnie Darko idea comes in. We have the idea of a character that we want to play, but we maybe have to twist things a little bit. We have to either put them in, we have to sort of get creative with the class we're assigning to them, or how do we implement that character in the game in order to have something that is not only fun to play, but fun, just fun to have on the table. Any questions there? I try to credit all the images that I use, but I think whoever created this is probably some anonymous 4chan user who's lost to the history. The game wasn't helpful, and if I can find it in 5 minutes in Google, see my points previous about being lazy. So half and half approach. What I really like about this approach is that whether or not we realize it, most of us in this room are already doing this. We are taking elements from multiple characters that we like, we're putting them together, and we're adding a bit of ourselves to create something new. And when we go to describe our characters at that first session, we use, okay, well, I am Luke Skywalker plus King D. I don't know, where did that come from? What does that even look like? Meta-Knight is small. How does that even work? That's the fun, that's the answer that we need to get to over the course of the session. So here we have Uniform. And I'm angry like the Yula is the bottle on there. And what I really like about this is we're sort of, you see how we're progressing here, the order that the progression that we're going for here is taking a character who is straight up, shaping it a little bit, and then what we have here is really synthesizing something new using these building blocks that we have in pop culture. This one maybe not exactly fit a particular theme quite as well, but it's just fun to have at the table. If you're this whole like me, and you're comfortable with I don't even know how you would implement that in the game. I feel like you're like a wizard or barbarian or something, or I guess he's a sorcerer. He was a sorcerer, I guess, because he has powers. We're not talking about like Thorians. It's just I'm not a course works. It's cool. Just definitely just ignore that whole sequence in the first film. Cool. First numeric cool. Any questions here? All right. How do you go along here? All right. So a few questions. I like to give people points to take away. And again, this whole presentation is available on Bitly. I'll show the link again as we get to the end, so you can take it home with you. It's my goal is to give you little tidbits of information so that you can take these ideas and bring them back to your groups. So when you're creating a character like this, on mechanics, is it possible in my rule system, be it D&D, be it Dungeon World, be it Monster of the Week, excuse me, is it possible for me to adapt those rules to the characters, the items, the scenarios, abilities that my character displays in their media? You know, if I'm playing a cold beam character, tons of cold spells in D&D. If I'm playing a vampire character, like we talked about, tons of vampiric abilities in D&D. Some characters just aren't going to fit that as well. That's okay, maybe you can work with your DM to figure it out. But speaking of working with your GM, or GM, I should say, are there items that I think would really flesh out my character? In fact, the Hardy Burton's briefcase of holding. It's clever, a little visual gag, like Nikes, I love it. Are there any items that I can sort of reskin and give to my character in order to give them that little bit of added recognition? Is that a word? I don't know. I'm really trying to encourage D&D as a sort of collaborative, emphasis on collaborative storytelling, and that means, top to bottom, GM working with players, getting their ideas, getting their suggestions, and synthesize something adventure like this that either gives them the items they want from the start or gives them a way to obtain those items that make them feel more like the character that they want to portray. On preparation, MacGyver, these quotes. Are there quotes, mannerisms, or accents? If I'm not doing an impression of this character, am I doing something to really impart to everyone at the table that, hey, I'm playing, I'm playing Mr. Freeze. I keep going back to the same examples. It's okay, it's cool. But yeah, what am I doing in order to make my character more recognizable to other characters, to other players at the table? And what is my character's motivation? As they are in their media, do they have some sort of rival? Do they have something they're trying to obtain? Can I work with my GM to incorporate that into my game so that I have a very clear motivation right from the start, even if it's a short campaign? I'm ready to go. I don't need to do an hour and a half of really awkward, why is this group together, why are we doing this, we're just going to Craigslist, whatever. We don't need to do that, because I know right from the start, Simon Belmont is not his butt kid, so he can smash anything in life. Cool. All right. Pitfalls. Not all right things in this way. Fitting the tone of the adventure. Oh boy. Once again, these are not specific necessarily to talk about characters. If you're picking a character who is that loner, still going to have to work as part of the group. Sorry. So if there's some reason that they might join up, if there's some reason that man needs to join his Justice League, whatever, keep that in mind. That can also be part of the fun if everybody's on the same page about that one character who's just kind of being upset. And as I mentioned earlier, we're kind of moving our goalposts here. We're not talking about winning a game. We're not talking necessarily about making a very powerful character. We're talking about creating a character in your game system that fits the archetype that you've chosen. So as a result, you might feel a little bit underwhelming in terms of power. That is okay. I like to give players, as a GM, doing this, I like to give players opportunities to shine either in-game, via the challenges that I'm presenting them with, or giving them recognizable bits to say, that is relevant to my character individually. That character is my rival. They show up, and I get to put a few quotes out of them, get to just it, and I feel like that's another way of giving players a really rewarding sense of involvement in achievement. Cool. Right. Any questions about any of this so far? Cool. So what I had in mind here was to do interesting characters for a few minutes. But I mean, if there's anything that maybe is popping into mind already, or if you have any questions or anything that you want to ask, at this point, really, we're coming to the close to the end of it. So I think if you're comfortable with me taking some of these lessons back with us, and we can just give you a general Q&A about DMing in general or anything. Does anybody have anything they really want to share? Any ideas? I think we came up with a really good one earlier, and that's the sort of thing that I really find engaging, and I feel find somewhat interesting on that in games. So, wrapping this all up, I talked about some of the common tabletop pitfalls that this sort of campaign can be overcome. I talked about not really feeling comfortable creating a character, not really having a voice, feeling like I have to choose what's best or my character won't be able to contribute, that sort of thing. That can really be overcome by some of the approaches that we've talked about today. Creating a theme that the group finds interesting, that you can really work with to create some new characters, challenging them to work within the limitations of the rules that you've chosen in order to create a character that's creating a theme and fun to play. And expanding your role-playing skills by taking a character who has so much to draw on already and putting your own personal spin on it. Maybe finding a new voice for yourself at the table, or just getting more comfortable in putting stuff out there, learning how to prepare in a different way. Cool. So before I open it up for questions, that is the short URL. I'm going to leave that up. And we're going to see who's really paying attention. Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. It's bit.ly/mag, capital MAG, Thunder, capital T. You can find this presentation. You can use it for your own reference. We share it officially. Die Hard is not a Christmas movie. So, does anybody have any questions? We've got 15 minutes, so I'm cool to answer general GM questions. I'm cool to answer questions that are specific to this. Is there anything anybody wants to get out of this time that we can have? What's up?
How do you balance those things?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think so. One of the things that I did when I was playing a vampire character, I'm sure there are vampire rules in that somebody has created for 5e. So the question was, even if we're not exactly creating a character with all the features and abilities that we have, like golems, and skeletons, broken RPGs, and stuff. How do we adapt it? How do we maybe make some? One thing I've built, I don't know if you heard is that I don't necessarily choose a rule set that says, all right, this is how to play a vampire, this is how to make a vampire in 5e, this is what your stats become, this is your abilities. I just played it thematically. I had the vampire touch spell, so like you were mentioning earlier, there might be items or spells or features that are already in the game that are very similar to the features that you want. And I just played it as though we were a vampire, but we didn't worry about things like light sensitivity or things like that in a way that impacted the game. So I wasn't losing hit points being out in the sun, I wasn't regaining hit points on my own, things like that you normally associate with vampire. So yeah, I mean, sometimes you might just have to roll with it and pretend a little bit, but pretending already, so what's a little bit more? Cool. Question. What's up?
I was thinking about starting a monster hunter campaign, but
yes.
I don't know how to balance the great sword or the long sword. Because I was they have to do level 3, and then for the long sword they have to do the spirit gauge. So I was I don't.
Yeah, I think you're it's the spirit gauge or is whatever. I'm aware of Monster Hunter. I think it looks cool. I think I see people playing Monster Hunter and I'm I want my fights to be that epic where you're preparing for it, you're taking it out on stages and it's running around and you have to manipulate the monster. It's really cool. I think that'd be great for D&D. I'm really excited to hear about that. But again, we're talking about maybe some of the things that are central to the character or to the setting and incorporating those. In this case, I think when I think Monster Hunter, I think about those big epic fights and everything I just talked about. I don't necessarily think looking at a charging a spirit gauge or what kind of deal. That kind of thing might be cool.
Kind of like the mechanic in Monster Hunter, and I don't want my characters not able to do that. Because it's a weapon.
Okay. I think number one, like I said earlier, somebody's already done it. Somebody, if you look it up, I brought up Tumblr as an example because there are some really good Tumblr blogs of D&D homebrew.
Okay.
Another good source that I use is Reddit, reddit.com. I kind of take it for granted that everybody here knows what Reddit is and everybody knows what Tumblr is. But there are a few communities on Reddit. Behind the Screen is a very good one for DM resources and homebrew. There are a few other ones for D&D homebrew on Reddit that are good. If you just search for D&D 5e Reddit, you'll get some results. But yeah, somebody's done it. Or somebody a lot more clever than me, as at least is willing to be doing good. Lazy. Yeah, I think maybe what I would say, I can't really give you much in terms of implementing that because I'm not really familiar with the feature. I'm not really know what it does, but I think in general, my approach to introducing homebrew rules to games is we do it, we accept from the start that this is homebrew. This isn't play tested. This isn't totally approved. I don't know how this is going to work.
Okay.
We might need to adjust our approach as we go, but as long as people understand that from the start, if you're not spending on it, like, oh, this is way too good. I need to, like, they can't be, my monsters don't stand a chance. Then if you spring that on them later, your players are probably going to be a lot more upset. You just have that understanding from the start that, hey, we're experimenting with something new, this is fun. We might need to, adjust it as we go on.
Okay.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else? What's up?
There's certain possible characters that maybe work for a shorter lived campaign versus a longer lived campaign. The novelty wears off.
Sure.
How would you approach either the game or a player when you bring up your character to a longer game and then find out the novelty doesn't scan the length of time?
Yeah, I think so. I think I heard a few questions in there. So, if you use this approach with the intention of bringing a character, pop-up character, into a longer game, and the novelty wears off, what do we do then? My thought on that is, at that point, if we played this character for 10 sessions and we're not really enjoying them either mechanically or just from a roleplay perspective, I think those are two different questions. Like, mechanically, if we're not really enjoying it, maybe we can do something to, like, multi-class or do some new item or something to the character, maybe spice it up.
The question is more focused on
Roleplay? Yeah, at that point, what I would really just say is, if we need to retcon some stuff about this character, we can do that. We either retcon it or we start, maybe if there was some development arc from the source media that you really connected with and you enjoyed, and you start building that arc into the game somehow. Like there was some villain or something that caused that character that you like to develop more, become more fully realized and interesting. Maybe that's something you can try to repeat in the game. If you don't want to do that, do that half and half. Like bring in another character, saying, okay, I was going to ask if you had a character in mind or.
No, I was
Okay, so we'll go with Final Fantasy X. We'll go with Titus, or Titus, I think it's Titus. Yeah, you're really upbeat guy, but maybe just a little one-dimensional in terms of other protagonists. You bring in another character who you find compelling from another game. I don't know, you bring in Sid Piper from Final Fantasy VII, and suddenly this character is a mishmash of those two characters, and we start learning more about the character. If we get retconning in the session, we do that, and we just really start thinking like, okay, well, what would that kind of character look like? Abilities, backstory, and so on. Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Anything else? We got only a couple minutes. What's up, Matt?
So, how would you go about transferring, so when you're giving your when you're giving the bounty hunter campaign example, how would you go about transferring bullets into a D&D kind of campaign?
They're in there. Yeah, I mean, there are rules for firearms in Prohibition. I'm really easy. There are standard Wizards of the Coast rules for firearms and loading properties and all that. Matt Mercer, who, his name, of course, I can't go through a D&D panel without bringing up Matt Mercer, created a gunslinger archetype that's on DM's Guild that has, because he had to, when they moved Critical Role from Pathfinder to 5e, he had to sort of retrofit one of the characters, Percival, who's a gunfighter. He had to retrofit that class into 5e. So he created a gunslinger rule set in 5e. It's on DM's Guild, it's pay what you want. I would really recommend checking that one out. But other than that, man, as long as it's not breaking the game, each one. Does that help?
Yeah.
Cool. What's up?
So,
Yeah. Very cool. Okay. The question was maybe bringing in younger gamers using this sort of approach. What kind of system might be a little bit friendlier for that? Monster of the Week has come to mind because that's one system that is lighter on rules. So if you look at games that are too two very popular systems that are sort of core rule sets that have a bunch of modules, like a superhero module, a monster module, a Sherlock Holmes module, a human module, are Powered by the Apocalypse and Fate. Those are two different courses here. So if you've heard of those, they have a bunch of different modules. I kind of going back to the Adventure Zone because we use things that are relevant to a lot of people to contextualize points. Adventure Zone is using I believe it's a Fate. Is it Fate or Powered by the Apocalypse? I forget. Module called Monster of the Week, where the whole game is built around hunting a monster. And all the character classes are relatively simple, and they all have abilities that are about like researching a monster, fighting a monster, escaping a monster, like all these sorts of abilities. I think that might fit very well with Stranger Things. And actually, I'd be very interested in seeing how that plays out. So, cool. I'll probably take one more. Does anybody else have any questions? Cool. All right. Well, I hope you have a very fun mag. Thanks everybody for taking the time to come to this campaign. We're doing a live play. Roll for MAGFest tonight, 9 p.m. in Hills 4. It is a heavy audience participation, D&D-esque improv situation. We play a game, I'm going to be real drowned. Yeah, we have a rotating audience member come up and play with us for a few minutes and then rotate with somebody else. So if you want to come, try to come early so you can get a ticket and we'll put you into the raffle basically to come up and play with us. So, 9 p.m. It is very fun. Cool. Thanks everybody.